Good morning.
Morning. It's good. Good.
We're good, Eliezer?
Yeah, great.
Baruch Hashem. All right, good morning, everyone. Today's schedule, as you mentioned, we'd start off with Daas Tevunos, and then we go to Parsha. And the full new schedule will be circulated either today or tomorrow, beginning with Yom Rishon. Daas Tevunos, page Ayin Gimel, which was scanned and sent out yesterday. Paragraph Pei Beis 82 if you're following it by the paragraph. Remember yesterday we read Rob Friedlander's footnote 173 about Hester Panim, the Guf, Ha'oras Panim, the Neshama, the same way that the Neshama takes the Guf and brings the Guf alive, which is what we learn in this week's parasha. God formed man from the dust of the earth, blew into his nostril the neshama of life, and man was alive. So the eyes didn't work and the ears didn't work, etc., until the neshama came into the body. And we always think that the neshama is a spiritual thing, the body is a physical thing, and the eyes work, and the ears work, and the mouth works, and the neshama is some spiritual thing that is trying to help you overcome your Yetzer Hara. It's a lot more than that. The neshama actually gives life to the physical body. The physical body cannot live, as we know, without a neshama. So the eyes are there, but cannot see without the neshama. The ears can be there, they're dust of the earth. They cannot hear without the neshama. So the neshama is in the guf. And as I said yesterday, when I say in the guf, I'm not talking about a geographical area. The neshama is inside your guf. It's a question of where the neshama is. I'm just making that, using those words, the neshama is in the guf for the purpose of understanding that the neshama is the engine that makes the guf work. And the neshama's goal is to get the neshama to work for purposes that will be neshama purposes. The neshama is going to lift up the eyes to see the right things and see things in a right way. It's going to lift up the whole person so that he is an Oved Hashem and he uses his physical body and his physical life in order to be an Oved Hashem. So the neshama is going to use the body. And when the body gets used to this idea, it's more than happy to cooperate because it will be elevated. By the same token, the outside hastoras upon him, what we see as God has turned his back, chas v'sholom, on the world. God's no longer supervising the world. It's a hefgewelt. It's chaos. It is not. Percolating inside and bubbling inside all that hastoras panim is a beautiful ha'oras panim that through the Ribono Shel Olam's chokhmah is bringing the world towards its ultimate goal of tikkun. And so inside what we think is hastoras panim is actually ha'oras panim that's driving the world in a certain direction, and that direction is for the ultimate tikkun ha'olam. And we're going to see more about that today in today's parsha. It jumps off the parsha, jumps out of the parsha when we learn about Shabbos Kodesh and what Shabbos Kodesh means. So that was our Friedlander's footnote 173. The neshama is inside the guf and making the guf run in a certain way for the benefit of the neshama and the guf. And similarly, this ha'oras panim that we don't see all the time, and what we see is hastoras panim a lot of the time. Actually, the hastoras panim has inside it ha'oras panim that is driving the hastoras panim to an ultimate good, wonderful goal for each individual and for the world. So now let's go to the Ramchal. Hamatzavim hashonim shel hayachas bein guf u'neshama. the different situations in the relationship between the guf and the neshama. There's a guf, there's a neshama, then the two of them have to coexist. Pei Beis, Rav Friedland has his heading, Harbe chukim udrachim tzorach lashlomes ha'odem v'habriya. There are many rules and paths that are needed in order to complete man and creation, upratehem rabim, and the specifics that go into the pathways to accomplish this. There are many, many details. Ach nekabetz rakas haklolim. What we're going to do, this is a summary of what the Ramchal is going to say. Rav Friedlander is writing this summary. Rav Friedlander says that we are going to, that the Ramchal is going to only summarize the pathways towards guf, neshama, and the interaction of guf and neshama. We are on page Ayin Gimel from yesterday's scan, paragraph Pei Beis at the bottom of the page. And the more we understand about guf, neshama, and guf and neshama, the more we're going to understand about the way Hashem runs the world, ha'oras panim, hastaras panim, and what happens when the two of them are working together. Amar HaSeichel, the Seichel says, Ata tzrichim anu lobo el hadragas zmani haneshama v'guf. Now we need to come to a point we're going to understand the different time periods for the neshama and the guf. We don't have a full understanding right now of these time periods. Ramchal later is going to explain the 5 major time periods of the guf and the neshama. Both now, these are periods of time now, and periods of time that are in the future. Part of this is even in your handout. It begins on page Ayin Tes. It's the last page of this scanned handout. Ramchal starts talking about 5 periods of time in the relationship between the guf and the neshama. So that's what he's referring to. The 5 periods of time between the guf and the neshama. It's a period of transition. The guf is more powerful than the neshama. The neshama is fighting the guf in order to get the guf to do the right things. Then the neshama is going to get more power. The guf gets less power. The neshama gets even more power. Guf gets less power. And this is a 5-stage transition until basically the neshama is the balabayas, and the guf is literally just, it's there, but it doesn't really exist as a competitor for the neshama. I am reading from the Ramchal Daas Tevunos, the scanned handout that was sent yesterday. And we've now turned to page Ayin Daled. Umatzaveim hashonim ha'ela. Aval od hakdama achas tzorach lahakdim etchila. But there is one more introduction that you need to have before we go into the subject of guf neshama and the relationship between the two. V'hu ki zeh poshet shaharbe chukim udrachim harbe tzrichim k'dei lahashlam l'chol inyonei ha'adam u'l'chol inyonei habriya b'chol zmaneim. And this first introductory idea is that it's very simple. It's poshet, that there are a lot of rules and a lot of pathways that are needed in order to bring man and creation lidei hashlama to its perfection. It's not something that is a chick-chock thing. This is a lot of work, and not only is a lot of work, there are a lot of paths which to accomplish it. And different people have different work in this world. Different people contribute their work to the ultimate tikkun, and everybody's off and should be doing their thing that the Rebbeinu Shalom sent them to this world for, in order to contribute to the ultimate tikkun olam. So there are different paths, and it's a complicated system in which we can get to the tikkun. Now we already explained earlier in the Sefer that we have complicated the situation ourselves. God didn't complicate this very much. This week's Parsha, the Ribono Shel Olam told Adam Arishan, you can eat from all the trees, but do not eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. He then had the Nesoyin through the Nachash to eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, through Chava, etc. And had he been Omed bin Nesoyin, had he turned his back on the Nachash, as we learned earlier in the Daas Tevunos, had the Adam Arishan, Chava, said to the Nachash, I'm very sorry, I cannot listen to you, because the ultimate objective truth is my creator. The ultimate objective truth came from the Ribono Shel Olam, who told me not to eat from this tree. Therefore, anything that contradicts the ultimate objective truth of my creator is automatically false. Therefore, Mr. Nachash, please turn around, leave me alone. You are a liar. That was the Nesoyin. Could Adam, Harishan, and Chava do that? Can they see the pure, objective truth of the Word of God and anything that contradicts that as being complete, false sheker? And they couldn't do it. Because the Nachash, one of the reasons, the Nachash told them that if you eat from this tree, which sounds crazy to us, and when we read it in this week's Parsha, it sounds crazy that the Nachash could have actually tried to persuade Adam and Chava, or Chava, to do what they did. He said, listen, Vayisem kelokim yodei tov v'ra. You can be God. If you eat from this tree, you can be God. And Rashi explains that the Nachash told Chava, listen, how did God create the world? God created the world. It's a beautiful world, as animals, plants, trees, colors. How did God in heaven create this world? He ate from this tree. And this tree made him so wise, so brilliant, so creative, that he then created the whole world around the tree. And that's why, the Nachash continues, and that's why the God in heaven has told you, do whatever you like, eat whatever you want, but do not eat from this tree. Because he knows if you eat from this tree, you will become a God too. And then God won't be able to boss you around if he is God and you are God. Gods can't boss each other around. So why don't you eat from this tree and you'll become God? This is one of the temptations that the Nachash puts in front of Chava and Adam. You can be God. Now you can't be God. There's only one God, one creator, and Adam and Chava really knew this. This is an objective truth from their creator. They are Maaseh Yadav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Adam and Chava are not born of any parents. They are direct creations, the handiwork, Kaviyachal, of the Ribono Shel Olam himself. And they understand this. But they allow the temptation, the idea that I can be God, to overtake them. And they're not concerned at this moment about God being the source of objective truth. They go into a state of suffix. They go into a state of doubt. Their mind starts playing games with them. Well, maybe the Nachash is right. That lapse in God being the objective truth becomes the downfall of man. Once that happened, the Pandora's box opened up for man to begin questioning whether God's truth is the objective truth or whether there can be other truths. That is why at Matan Torah, it says that the Jews came to the Madrega of Adam Arishan before the Chetz. A Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara says that at Matan Torah, Paskazu Amasam, the contamination, the infection of the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra that ran through mankind stopped. It was healed, cured. Bnei Yisrael no longer had Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra in them, and they could have again got to that. They were on that Madrega, of Adam Rishon before the Chet. And in fact, they could have lived forever. Unfortunately, they did the Chet HaEgel, and David HaMelech writes in Tehillim, Ochen ka'odam temusim uch'achad hasarim tipoilu. And therefore, unfortunately, you will die again like regular human beings. After the Chet HaEgel, Ochen ka'odam temusim. You will again go back to the state of Adam Rishon, post-Chet, and you will have to suffer death as well. So what happened to mankind, and then specifically to Bnei Yisrael, is they had, Adam Rishon had this one Nisayan. He wasn't Omed ben Nisayan, and he opened a whole Pandora's box. At that point, the work to fix, to be masakin, the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, we'll call it 10 pounds of work. But Aveira goreres Aveira. One sin leads to another sin. And once this Pandora's box was opened, all kinds of things began happening in the mind of mankind. Is the God the only God? Maybe there are two, chas v'shalom. Is he the source of objective truth? Maybe someone else is the source of objective truth. Maybe God's objective truth was good for 500 years, but because of things moving on, they're no longer true. Maybe changes have been made. Maybe God is not eternal truth. All these kind of things began to open up. And every time man went and adopted, embraced, lived this new kind of heresy, the 10 pounds of the Chet of the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, which required a certain amount of work to be masakin, every time there's another Aveira which has its roots in the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, we multiply the difficulty in being masakin in the world. So, for example, if a person leaves his home and he goes 1,000 meters, you're not allowed to go more than 1,000 meters, whatever it is. It's hard to keep up with all the rules. A person goes 1,000 meters from his home. In order to get back home, he has to go back 1,000 meters. But if a person travels 150 kilometers from his home, then he's going to have much more work to get back home. He has 150 kilometers to go back home. So after the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra of Adam and Chava, they were distanced from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They got thrown out of Gan Eden. The work was a certain amount of work to be masakin what they did, which they were never able to do, as we know. However, every time another step is taken, ultimately, which has its source in the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, instead of being 1,000 meters away, you keep on moving further and further away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that takes a lot more work to get back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So as time moves on, the work increases to get back to where we were in Adam Harishon Kodem Hachet. So therefore, the paths the Ramchal is talking about, the work that needs to be done over time in order to get back to Adam Harishon Kodem Hachet, and to get back to the perfection and the Tikkun HaOlam, has many paths, and it's a complicated situation, not because God made it complicated, because we make it complicated every time we take a step in the wrong direction. Every step in the wrong direction means there's another step we have to take back in order to get on the correct path. Uchvanema, the Ramchal says at the top of page Ayin Dalet, Rabbis Asisa, Ata Hashem Elekai, Niflosecha, Umachshavosecha. V'nemar, the pasuk says, Magolu Masech Hashem, Marab Masech Hashem. These psukim are talking about how the depth and the greatness of creation, and therefore the mass amount of work that has to be done to fix and correct and be masakin this huge, magnificent bria. Akal kol ponim tzorch shiyu haprotim nechnasim uvonim tachas haklolim, v'haklolim lo yiyu kol kach, al v'proteim heim shiyu rabim, v'yaspik l'chol hatzor b'chol habriya zos. This is basically what we mentioned at the beginning of this year, Rav Friedlander's heading to this paragraph. The Ramchal saying the paths are, they're just so numerous. The details are so numerous. We cannot go into each detail and each path into bringing the world to shleimus, to perfection. What we can talk about are the general rules, and the details fall under the general rules. And that's what we'll have. We'll have general rules of the paths to be masakin in the world, masakin ourselves, with the understanding that it's an analogy from Guf Neshama to Hester Panim and Ha'aras Panim. And from those general rules, we'll be able to begin ourselves to extrapolate what the details will be. Pei Gimel. Amra HaNeshama, the Neshama responds to the Seichel, Zeh Pashut Vadai. This is simple to me. Ein Protim Shein Aleim Klolim. There are no details that can't be summarized into general rules. Umasha Protim Miyagim Hadas Lekapsam. And this, that many, many details make a person tired. If you give a person hundreds of details to study, he gets tired and it's difficult for him to grasp all the details. Haklolim nochem heim elov lekabelosa. If you can teach a person the general rules, which may be just a few, the person has a capacity to absorb them, understand them. Al-Kain, therefore, acha klolim tzarach lirdo v'lo acha pratim. Therefore, a person should always try to study the general rules and let the details flow from the general rules. But if you're going to get bogged down in every detail, you're going to get bogged down. And it's going to be very tiresome. And eventually, you're going to just close the book and say, this is just too much. Nobody wants to read Lahavdil, the United States tax code, which, at least when I was going to school, was a very, very thick book with sub-chapters and sub-paragraph and sub-details. Nobody wants to sit and read the details, the 16 exceptions to the first rule, and the second rule's 24 exceptions to the 16 exceptions in the first sub-paragraph. Nobody wants to get into all these details, and you don't want to hear about them. You just want to know the general rules. And if a question comes up about the general rule, then you want to go to a tax code and you want to look up the specific item that you need to know about your specific situation. But you don't want to have to go through every single detail. And this is something the Ramchal's now going to quote, Pei Dalet, Yediyah, the Friedlander's heading, Gimel Yediyas Hen. There are three ideas that the Ramchal is now going to talk about. Aleph, Yediyas Midas Hester Ponim V'Ha'aras Ponim. We're going to talk about the Midah. What does it mean, Hastoras Ponim, which we would call God seems to be hiding from the world. The Midah of Ha'aras Ponim, where we can see God running the world. The light is on the world. Beis, that's the first idea. Ha'aras panim, hastaras panim. Beis, what's the second idea? Yediyas chibura. I need to understand how hastaras panim and ha'aras panim connect together and work together. This is what we talked about before in Rav Friedlander's footnote that we read yesterday. Guf and neshama. I need to understand Guf and neshama, which the Ramchal already explained to us before Sukkot. He explained to us the guf, where it comes from, the neshama, where it comes from. The neshama can only do so much work inside the guf, and then the guf has to go back to the ground to decompose, to get rid of Eitz Daas Tevunos disease, and the neshama goes to Gan Eden Olam HaNeshamas to, quote-unquote, recuperate from the many years of work with the guf, get back its spiritual wattage. And then at Tchias HaMesim, this revitalized neshama goes into this new guf that doesn't have the Eitz Daas Tevunos infection in it. We have Tchias HaMesim. So we looked at guf, neshama, guf and neshama together, and the result of guf and neshama together. There's a guf, there's a neshama. During a man's lifetime, they're together. They then separate at death. And ultimately, they come back together for Tchias HaMesim. So we study that. Now, by analogy, we're going to look at, instead of Guf Neshama, we're going to look at Ha'aras Panim, Hastaras Panim. The second thing we're going to look at is Yedias Chiburim. What happens when they come together? Just like we studied, what happens when the Guf and the Neshama come together? We're now going to study what happens when Ha'aras Panim and Hastaras Panim come together and have to operate together. Gimel. And what's the third thing we're going to study? Yedias HaToladot Mechiburim. What are the consequences? What are the ramifications for when they come together? We did this exact kind of analysis when we talked about Guf and Neshama. This is the Guf, this is Neshama, this is what happens when they come together, and this is the ultimate ramification of them coming together, which was Tchias HaMesim. Now we're leaving Guf and Neshama, which are analogous to Hastaras Panim and Ha'aras Panim. We're studying the same things. Ha'aras Panim, Hastaras Panim. Ha'aras Panim, Hastaras Panim coming together, and the ramifications of them coming together. Pei Dalet. Amar HaSeichel, the Seichel says, V'kach Amru Chazal. This is a medrash in Hazinu. The Ramchal is now referring to what the Neshama, what the Seichel and the Neshama said, that there's just too many details to study here. And the successful way to learn is to learn the general rules. And then from the general rules, you can extrapolate details as necessary. And this is what the Medrash says in Hazinu. La'olam yiyu divrei Torah biyadecha klolim v'lo pratim. A person should always make sure that his divrei Torah are maintained as general rules and not in all the details. If you understand, I'm just giving a very, very simple example. A person knows that if he forgets to say Ya'aleh v'Yavo on Rosh Chodesh, he may have to repeat Shmona Esrei. He knows that general rule. That general rule has a lot of details. Did he forget Ya'aleh v'Yavo and Shmona Esrei Shachris Mincha, or was it Ma'ariv? Did he forget Ya'aleh v'Yavo and then remember before he took his 3 steps back? Or did he remember he forgot Ya'aleh v'Yavo after he took his 3 steps back? Did he remember he forgot to say Ya'aleh v'Yavo before Sim Shalom, before Hatov Shimcha L'chon Hodos, or after? So a person knows his klolim. If I forgot Ya'aleh v'Yavo, there is an issue. Now, if you're a Paisik, you want to have all the details ready to go in your mind, because if someone asks you a Shaila, you can paskin the Shaila, but al Tegamgam go. You can paskin it immediately. However, not all of us can maintain all the details of all the halachas and the whole Torah together. So the Medrash in Hazinu tells us that keep the klolim in mind and keep the details, be aware of the fact that there are a lot of details. And if the details become relevant, you know you need to take a look at the details for greater understanding. But if you're just going to try to study all the details of all the halachas, it's going to be mi'ager you, it's going to tire you out, and eventually it's going to frustrate you and you're going to close the book. So we're told, keep klolim. Now, the reason my example of Shmona Esrei is not the best example in the world with Ya'aleh v'Yavo is because those are the kinds of things that you want to know right away. If you forgot Ya'aleh v'Yavo in Shmona Esrei, and you know that that's an issue, but you don't know what to do, you need to figure out what to do in the middle of Shmona Esrei. But the halacha is, people don't realize this, the halacha is if you're davening Shmona Esrei, and a shaila comes up in the middle of Shemona Esrei, you don't know how to continue davening, you are allowed to walk from your place, go to get a Mishnah Brura, look up the halacha, and then continue davening. You go back to your original place, you just stand where you are now. Okay, these are the details. But there are a lot of general rules, there's a lot of general subjects. Those are the things that we need to study. And then the details, as they become relevant, we can involve and engross ourselves in the details. So that's what the Ramchal is going to tell us now. And he's told us that they can't write a sefer on all the details and all the paths in order to bring the world to its ultimate tikkun, ultimate shleimus. It can't be done. too many people, not to kind of hurry, there are a lot of people, different pathways, different things are being done, different situations of the world. What we can do is set some general rules from which everybody can understand generally how the world is operating through Hastoris Panim, Ha'oris Panim, the connection between the two, and the ultimate ramification. Hine re'isa kvar heyo shtei midas lo yisbarach. I have already explained to you that there are two basic midos, two basic tools, not characteristic traits. We talked about this over and over. God has no characteristic traits. His midas are tools that he uses to run the world. We have already discussed, and I've already explained to you, the Ramchal says, that there are two basic midos, hester panim v'ha'oras panim. There's times where God runs the world where it would appear there's a hester panim, his face, so to speak, is hidden. We can't see him. It seems like he's not running the world. And there's ha'oras panim. The light is shining. We can see things clearly. Those two midos are the basic source material for the guf and the neshama. This is what we've been talking about yesterday, today in Rav Friedland, in this footnote. Guf hastoras panim, neshama ha'oras panim. And what we've already studied about the guf and the neshama, the interaction between the two, and the ultimate goal of the two, because the guf and the neshama come from ha'oras panim and hastoras panim, and I already understand how guf and neshama work, I now can go to ha'oras panim and hastoras panim and figure out, using basically the same analysis, as to what ha'oras panim, hastoras panim are and how they work together. So again, he says, I already explained to you that the Rebbeinu Shalom has two basic midos, two basic tools. These two things, hester panim and ha'oras panim, are the basic source material for the guf and the neshama. So therefore, the analogy works. Guf hastoras panim, neshama ha'oras panim. V'lanu lahavin shtei midas ha'ela kalachs b'fnei adam b'chol partayim ha'rabim ha'nachlom tachskaleim. And we need to understand these two midos, ha'oras panim and hastoras panim, each separately, based on the general rules, which will then give us an idea of the many details that fall underneath it. Because now that we can get a practical, basic human understanding of ha'oras panim and hastoras panim, we'll then be able to look back and say, all the study that I did in Daas Tevunos about guf and neshama, I understand that much better, because now that I understand whatever I learned about guf is coming from source, and the neshama that I studied about, I now understand better, because the neshama source material is ha'oras panim, which I'm learning about now. And now, when we finish this process, not only will I understand hastoras panim and ha'oras panim and how they work, I will then be able to go back and say, oh, I have a better understanding of everything I learned about guf, which is hastoras panim, and neshama, which is ha'oras panim. יש לנו לדעת עוד ששתי מידות הללו באות כאחת להנהיג לעולם כולו וליושבו, ואין לך דבר שאין לו מקום לשתי המידות הללו, ההסתר באיסגליה והאורה באיסקסיה, וכמו שביארנו לעיל. We're going to read that sentence again. This is a very important sentence. This is what we call the percolating sentence. And now that we understand and we've studied what we've studied about the guf and the neshama, yesh lanu and ha'oras panim and hastoras panim, yesh lanu ladas od. We need to also know Sheshtei midas halolu, these two midos, ha'oras ponim, ha'storas ponim, and they look like they contradict each other, and they are extremes that have no connection to each other. God's hidden from us, and God's revealed to us. Ba'os ka'achas, they're both functioning together. Lahanig la'olam kula u'liyoshva, to run the world and the entire creation. They're both doing it together. There's nothing happening in the world that is not happening with both of these midos, except hahester be'isgalia. The Ramchal here is using isgalia. It means golui, revealed. It's an Aramaic or Kabbalistic way to say revealed. The ha'ora and God's being revealed is biskasia. Excuse me, iskasia comes from the word kisui, covered. This is the percolating sentence. Nothing in the world is happening without both of these midas, which sound like they're two polar opposite extremes. God is hidden. We don't see God running the world. And God is absolutely revealed. He's running the world. And they're both happening at the same time, except the Hester is Be'isgalia and the Ha'ora is Be'iskasia. It's a paradox. It's an absolute paradox. The paradox being that Ha'oras Pana means you can see. I can see the Rabbonu Shalom. He's revealed. I can see him running the world. But seeing God running the world is actually be'iskasia. It's being hidden. You need to have a very special vision. You need to have Daas Tevunos vision to watch and see that what you think is chaos is actually being run on a very, very perfect order. You need special eyeballs for that. So that the fact that God is actually revealed in the world is a hidden idea. The fact that God is hidden from the world is the revealed idea. It's a paradox. But this is the percolating sentence. The Hester, the fact that God is hidden is Galia. It's everywhere. If it's you can see it clearly. You can see clearly that God is not l'cha'ora running the world. That anybody can tell you. You can look at any newspaper, read the news. You can look at any media outlet, read it, and the things that people say and the things that people do. Where is God? That situation is out there. Anyone can see it. The Hester, God's being hidden from the world, is Bisgalia. It's everywhere for everyone to see that he's hiding. The Ha'ara, the fact that God is actually lighting the world and he is running the world, is Askasia. That's hidden. So we have the revealed supervision, the revealed Hanhaga, and the Hanhaga that is covered up. And the Hastaras Panim is working, and everybody can see that. Everybody can see that. We can all see the Hastaras Panim. That doesn't take more than you and eyes. If you want to be able to pierce through the Hastaras Panim, like Superman, Lahavdil eyes, see through the wall. If you see through the wall, you're going to see that in the Hastaras Panim, there's a Ha'oras Panim. And that Ha'oras Panim is moving the Hastaras Panim, like the Neshama in the Guf is moving the Guf in directions that it needs to go in for the ultimate perfection of the Guf. The Ha'oras Panim is inside the Hastaras Panim. You can't see the Ha'oras Panim with your human eyes, but everything that is happening that we see and through our human eyes as where is God? If you can open up your eyes and have those special eyeballs that pierce the surface, you're going to get to see a whole new world of Ha'oras Panim, where the Hastaras Panim is actually moving the ball forward towards Tikkun Ha'olam. So this is a paradox. It is what we call the percolating sentence. The hastoras, the ha'oras panim, is inside the hastoras panim. The Ramchal says, again, the bottom of page Ayin Daled, Yesh lanu ladas, we need to know. Shashtei midas halalu, these two tools, ha'oras panim and hastoras panim. God's not running the world. God is running the world. These are polar opposite, and they are not ba'os ka'achas. They both come together at the same time. Lahanig la'olam kula ulyoshva, in order to run the whole world and all its inhabitants. Ve'ein lecha davar she'ein lo makom l'shtei hamidas halol. This is page Ayin Hey now. There is nothing happening in the world where these two characteristic traits are not functioning all together at the same time. Ha-hester is Galia, the hester, the idea that God's hidden and he's not running the world, he's left the world in a chaotic state, is Galia. God is hidden and not everyone knows. Everybody can see that. V'ha'ara, and the light that God is actually shining on the world and he's actually running the world, that is iskasia. That's hidden. For that you need to develop your eyeballs in order to see things that other people cannot see. So as an example, again, this is not the perfect example, but Rabbi Akiva with his colleagues, the Tanoim, at the end of Masechta Makos, looking out at the Har HaBayis, and Shu'olim Hilchubo, and the Tanoim are crying, and Rabbi Akiva is laughing. And the Tanoim ask Rabbi Akiva, why are you laughing? And he says to them, well, why are you crying? And they explain to him, what do you mean, why are you crying? The Beis HaMikdash is burned down, and now there's animals running through the holiest place in the world. Why? What's the question? Why are we crying? Of course we're crying. And Rabbi Akiva says, you're looking at a churban. My eyeballs see something completely different. My eyeballs see that the words of the Nevi'im came true. And there's no Beis HaMikdash standing in front of me. But what I see in front of me is already the next Beis HaMikdash. I already see children, men, women, dancing in the streets of Yerushalayim. Because that's what the Nevi'im told us. If the Nevi'im told us that there would be a destruction, they also told us there would be a tremendous rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash and rebuilding the city of Yerushalayim, but Biaskov said, Me'er Yameinu. Rabbi Akiva is not being dramatic. Rabbi Akiva is not trying to perform a drama theater here. The dialogue between him and his colleagues is, his colleagues say, what are you laughing? And from a normal vantage point, when you're looking at the Churban, not so many years after the Churban, but you're looking at the Churban, and the normal thing is to cry. So Rabbi Akiva is laughing, and his colleagues are crying. His colleagues say, why are you laughing? Rabbi Akiva should have answered them why he's laughing, and said his ultimate answer. Because if the words of the Nevi'im came true, that there'll be a Churban, the words of the Nevi'im will come true, that there'll be a rebuilding. Finished. He doesn't do that. He has a question to them. When they say, why are you crying, which is simply a normal question, why are you crying looking at the Churban? He says, why are you laughing? And then they say, because of the Churban. Then he says, no, there's nothing to cry about. The fact that Rabbi Akiva said to them, why are you crying, is because Rabbi Akiva didn't even understand why they're crying. Why didn't Rabbi Akiva even understand that they're crying? Why did he ask them, why are you crying? The normal state of affairs is to cry. Rabbi Akiva is on some madrega that he's laughing. So his colleagues say, why you cry? Why are you laughing? Answer them, why are you laughing? Why are you asking them why you're crying? Of course they should be crying. Rabbi Akiva is on a madrega where he has Rabbi Akiva eyeballs. He's Rabbi Akiva understanding of world history. He has Rabbi Akiva's understanding of the future. And Rabbi Akiva is looking at something that the others are not looking at. His colleagues, as great as they were, their Tanoim, they are seeing Churban. And Rabbi Akiva is laughing and he says, why are you crying? I don't see the same thing you're seeing. We're talking about Rabbi Akiva eyeballs. We're talking about a very special level that a person could get to where that which is iskasya, but on a normal level, this is hidden from people. People don't have the eyeballs to see what's happening inside the Churban. That inside the Churban, there's actually a rebuilding happening. You need special eyeballs to see that. Generally speaking, the Hester Panim, God has left us. God is no longer running the world. It's chaos. Anybody can tell you that. And that's the human eyeball approach. That's what it looks like, Chas v'sholom. And that's, remember, where the Sefer began. Then the Shama said to the Sefer, I don't understand this. I believe it, but I don't understand rationally how you can talk about Hashgacha. Where's the Hashgacha? The place is chaotic. And it is true that the Hester, the idea that God has left the world in a chaotic state and really doesn't care much about it anymore, is basically it's out there. But the idea that percolating inside all this Hester is a perfectly run world that's moving towards the Tikkun and the Geula Shlema, that's iskasi, that's hidden. That you need special eyeballs for. The Ramchal says, the Seichel says, after we do this, and you understand this, that like the neshama is in the guf and moving the guf forward, so too the ha'aras panim is in the hester panim and running it forward. We're then going to study what it means for these two things to be together, the ha'aras panim, the hastaras panim, and the ha'aras panim being inside the hastaras panim. Biyos goveres ha'achas o ha'acheres. When during the different periods of the world, it seems the hester panim has completely overtaken the ha'aras panim, and other times in the world, we've seen this in history, he will show us, where the ha'aras panim has overtaken hastaras panim. A perfect example of that, it didn't last very long. The 40 years of Shlomo HaMelech was an unbelievable period of time of ha'aras panim. Beis HaMikdash, the first Beis HaMikdash b'Yafyam, Eretz Yisrael was settled by the Yidden. Goyim came from all parts of the world to bring karbonos. Shlomo basically ruled over the world. The Jewish people were held in the greatest esteem. Ish tachas gafna, ish tachas te'eno. So we have a period where ha'aras panim, what does it look like when God is showing the world in its full glory that he is the sovereign and his people are the chosen people, and Eretz Yisrael is the chosen land, and Yerushalayim is the chosen city, and the Har HaBayis is the chosen area, and the Beis HaMikdash is God's quote-unquote house on earth. When was this so revealed to the world, and it was so understood that the Queen of Sheba came to Jerusalem to bring karbonos and to see what's going on in Jerusalem, and she was amazed at the brilliance of the Jewish people and amazed at the brilliance of Shlomo HaMelech? That's the ha'aras panim. That's an example of the world being run where there's a clarity as to the God being the sovereign, God's chosen people, God's chosen land. And this is what we pray for, as we mentioned before Rosh Hashanah. In all uvachains, uvachain tein pachtach Hashem Elokeinu al kol maasecha, ve'imosra al kol masher barasa, v'yirucha kol ha'masim, v'yishtachmu l'fanei kol ha'bruim, v'yasu chulam aguda achas la'asitzayin t'lev v'sholem. This is what we're praying for. We read the Ramchal. We're praying for the whole world to come to this realization so that there'll be a ha'oras panim for the whole world. And the Ramchal talked about ha'oras panim and hastaras panim in the Ramchal that we read about the Tfilas on Rosh Hashanah. The Tefillah on Rosh Hashanah is, Rabbanu Shalom, can you now reveal the ha'oras panim, so the ha'oras panim should no longer be iskasi, it shouldn't be covered up, that we should be able to have the full view of your sovereignty. Okay, Harilanu Shalosh Yediyas. Therefore, the Ramchal says there are three ideas we're going to have to develop. Yediyah Shtei Hamida Zula Atzma V'Zula Atzma. I'm going to have to explain to you this one and this one. Ha'oras panim, what does it mean? Hastaras panim, what does it mean? That's concept one we're going to have to talk about. Yediyas chiburam lifol tomid gam yachad. Then we're going to have to study what the connection, the ha'oras panim coming into the hastaras panim, lifol tomid gam yachad. At all times, they're working in unison to bring the world lidei tikkun. The third thing we're going to have to study is Yediyas hatoldos hanoldos min achibra zel minayim. We're going to have to understand the ramifications and the results of the ha'oras panim and the hastaras panim working together. In different periods of time, while the ha'oras panim and the hastaras panim are working in unison, sometimes the ha'oras panim is given greater power than the hester panim, and sometimes the hester panim is given more power than the ha'oras panim, but they're working in unison for one ultimate goal of tikkun ha'olam.